Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to talk all about the Student Compass. And yeah, you're going to get to know what all this is about. Mentoring, the gap year planning, the inter-gap reflection, and post-gap year college planning. And we have our expert here, Jake, today joining us to talk more about all the work that he does to help so many. So Jake, first and foremost, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself to our listeners to start.
Well, thank you for having me on. This should be an interesting treat for me, certainly. My name is Jake Horne. I have a company called the Student Compass, which is really a mentoring, business venture enterprise. I work with Gen Z students who graduated or are graduating from high school and are interested in taking a year off before going off into the big wide world, college or wherever, to simply have some other time besides academic, to just think about what their place is in the world and how they're going to orchestrate the future for themselves.
Well, that's funny. The first time I ever heard of the term gap year was when, it was Prince Harry, and he took a gap year, and then also, Kate Middleton took a gap year, and I didn't know what that was, being here in the States. But a few years ago, I did learn what that was about, and I'm excited to hear more because I feel a lot of more adolescents are striving this way, gaining so much more knowledge, and there's so much to it, Jake. But before we get into more details about the Student Compass, by the way, tell us the website, how we can contact you.
So the name of the company is The Student Compass, and it's www.thestudentcompass.com. And it should come up at the top.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Well, let's get to know you, if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, and let's walk through your backstory here. Because I was reading about you, what inspired you to become a career professional. You said you were a floater. So let's get your backstory. Go ahead.
So I grew up in Boston and I was part of an upper class white Bostonian group that all went to private schools. And so I lived in a cocoon, and I was in that cocoon through middle school, high school, so literally for 13, 14 years. And then I went off to college. I went to Harvard, and I found that I loved Harvard. It was great, but also it was during, tells you how old I am, during the Vietnam War. And the university was sort of in a lockdown state. It was no classes. This is my junior year, 1970, 71.
Okay.
And it got ridiculous. By Christmas of 70 into 71, I'd had it. I was not getting to classes. There was nothing happening, no exams, no nothing. And I said, this is ridiculous. I'm wasting my time. I went to the powers that be at Harvard and said, look, I've got to take some time off. And they said, swell. And in those days, you could do that and easily. And I left, much to my parents' unhappiness. As a matter of fact, my father disinherited me because I left. But I had to, because it was a useless exercise for me. I was stagnant, and I knew there was a big wide world out there, and I just needed to reset myself. So essentially, I stuck my thumb out, and literally for 6 years, I was out there roaming the earth, looking for work, hitchhiking around, meeting all these remarkably interesting people from all over North America, Central America, Europe. And, I consider myself a moderately sophisticated individual up to that point. And my eyes were wide open by the time I had done this because, I was bumping up with people who from all over the world who were taking time off from their schooling. And by the way, gap years have been around forever in Europe. I mean, kids typically after they graduate from their high school experience, virtually automatically take a gap year. It's kind of expected. And so it's no big deal for them. And of course, getting around Europe is something, very, very different than getting around the United States. But nonetheless, I eventually, with the help of my wife-to-be, she said, okay, this is ridiculous. You've got to go back to school, which I did. I went back to Harvard and finished up. But I went back a very, very different person with a very different perspective on the world and my place in the world. And that's what I was really trying to figure out is, who am I? What's my purpose? What's my meaning? What can I do with it?
Well, amazing story. Congratulations, because this is pretty intense. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, like I said, here in the States, I didn't know about the gap year until I heard about it overseas. But it really, talk about some of the things that you gained, that knowledge you gained during that time being out alone. And by the way, you mentioned you were floating around looking for work. I mean, that is pretty, I'm impressed how you kind of walked away from your family in a sense, or vice versa, right? And did that rift ever heal? Just curious.
Oh, absolutely. No. It was good. Once I went back to school, my parents loved my wife, so she was the binder. So it made it possible. It gave me re-entry. But frankly, my father particularly got to see me as a very different person and appreciated what happened. But he was an earlier generation, and I was on the cusp of this other generation. So we did very happily all get back together, and it was it's been great. I ultimately decided, after doing a few things as an entrepreneur, decided I could probably be a pretty good teacher, and I started teaching.
That's what I read. Yeah, tell us specifically what you were teaching.
So it was interesting because I had never been a teacher before. But I always had some verbal skills, and I was somewhat of a performer. And I figured, well, those two pieces go together nicely when you're teaching kids. Now, I got a job working at a school for students who are bright. It's called neurodivergent. Now, it used to be dyslexia.
Yes, correct.
And it's kind of interesting. I didn't have a clue what dyslexia was when I started. So that's, I was starting from scratch.
Yeah.
The brilliance of this experience for me was ongoing learning for me, was understanding how complex and myriad the way the brain works, how it perceives the world, how it expresses itself. And all these kids who had dyslexia were pretty beaten up and kind of emotionally, academically, because they couldn't perform according to the sort of standard SAT model of you throw information in, you kick it out, and you do it fast. They're more cogitators, they're more reflectors, and they also tend to be, it takes some time to pull that information out of their heads. The brilliance of it is that these kids the ones I worked with were amazing. They've all gone off and done pretty much primarily, they've been working in the arts. They've been working in communications. They've been working in the creative realm. That's the way many of them have perceived their world. There are very few that are lawyers, a fair number of doctors, but it's just interesting that I developed an incredible appreciation for the complexity of the mind and how when you teach, you have to teach to all of those minds. And there are ways to do it. The problem is that schools aren't doing it. They're still stuck in the siloed, history, English, math, science, and it all works, well, except the kids come out of those schooled experiences not knowing that there's actually a connection between all these disciplines. That in the world, it's an amalgam of all of them put together. Wow. And they have no experience whatsoever at putting those, laterally thinking across all these disciplines. And the thing is that in this new world that they are in now, it's all lateral thinking. It's all, how do you put these various, not seemingly obvious combinations together to create something new? Example, the smartphone.
Oh, yeah.
that is a combination of all this lateral thinking of multiple different technologies all put together and to create this very unique, very different thing, which is obviously revolutionize the world, frankly. But anyway, so I started teaching. Yeah. I learned a lot. I decided I was done with teaching after about 28 years. and I started a gap year program, finally coming full circle in 1991, and have been doing it ever since. So I've been working primarily with high school kids.
Okay.
Who found me, and they've been in school for 14 years. They know the world is a bigger place. They're adventurous. They want to go out and understand the world, and they want to understand the world as it applies to them and what their place is in it. So those were my early kids. What's happening now is really more of a reflection of what these kids have been through, the Gen Z generation have been through over the last 24 years, which is just more of a dysfunctional society, all these new transformations that are coming down the pike and that are challenging all society and human society in ways that are totally novel and at a pace that is humans are very unused to. I know I'm talking a lot.
No, it's pretty amazing, though, how, we are transitioning here as a society. And you mentioned, like, the traditional worldview of, we're supposed to, go to school, go to college, have your career, do all that. I love that we are learning there's more to that. We're talking about the gap year. We're talking about our friend here, Jake Horne. By the way, if you are just tuning in, we need to remind everyone how we reach out to him. It's thestudentcompass.com. That's thestudentcompass.com. Now, you're based out of Connecticut, but you're helping people. Is it worldwide or nationwide?
It's worldwide. Let me just, I think the website, you threw a D in there.
Oh, no, the Student Compass.
COMPASS.
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm. Sorry. The Student Compass, like COMPASS.com.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, actually, I work with kids from all over the world. I work Vienna, Paris, London, Tel Aviv, Denver, San Francisco, New York, Miami. I mean, it's just, this lovely technology that we're on right now actually works really well for this kind of work.
Zooming, right? The virtual world, still part of that transition of how things are changing. And, I just also want to point out that you mentioned your personal thoughts in regards to it's a quote, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty. We must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. Just want to make sure we get that in there too.
Right. Well, that's a Lincoln quote from the
correct.
But it applies today, as far as I'm concerned. We get stuck in these. We spin and get stuck and enthralled in these, silos. And the fact of the matter is, the silos are silos, and they make it impossible for the kind of interaction and communication that's absolutely necessary today for these kids, which is to break out of those silos and have conversations across every aspect of human experience, because what these transformations that are coming down the pike are going to require a tremendously creative, laterally thinking, resilient, adaptive, strong, confident individuals who have practice in thinking in creative new ways. Because, between climate change, between AI and all those issues, ethical issues, the inability for humans, by and large, to think long term, to think about cause and effect. These are absolutely critical. So what happens is you get the development of new technologies, and as a result, because the money is so good, they get developed. But then nobody's looking at the ramifications, and the ramifications we see. We see with issues of a brain. These Gen Z kids have grown up with technology, and they've grown up with screens, and they've grown up with being dependent on those relationships built through the screen, and ultimately, sadly, all of the weird things that happen, and they can't discriminate. They haven't had enough practice, and schools have done very little to help them be able to discriminate, be critical thinkers about not just accepting what they see. at this very moment in time, that's the enthrall.
Yeah.
And that has to be broken because, we've got technology change, amazing, fast, which is going to change, the way we do things in this world. We've got climate issues. We have issues, global economic issues that are going to force people from all over the world to migrate in the tens of millions. And there's going to be all sorts of pressure because of that, not just on the United States, but on the world. There's all sorts of resource competition because it always has been. It's just accelerated. So, all these things are coming down the pike, and these kids aren't prepared for it.
Well, I also love on your website, you offer a list of future career potentials. And I looked at them before we spoke this morning, and I was amazed. I'm like, these things I've never heard of. There was a social media architect. There was entertainment trends analyzer. There's robotic counselors, robotic personality engineers, all these new careers. And also the metaverse, right? There's world designers, all these new careers that, when we were growing up, didn't exist. So it's amazing to see how we are a new world of change and how we're changing so much. And I would also, I love to find out specifically some of the services that you provide. There's plenty of them, but do you want to, go over some of it and how it works to work with you?
Yeah, well, certainly. So philosophically, I think we're at a moment now where these kids who are going off to college, for instance, need to take a break because going to college, is a unique experience. Aside from the fact it's profoundly expensive, and it is also an opportunity if you are engaged and you're in a transformative kind of head mindset. Most schools, and I'm digressing, sorry, but most schools do transactional stuff. You sit in front of the professor professor talks at you and you write it down.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's not engaged.
Nope.
Okay? Which means you're not really using all your senses and you're not learning how to apply it to life. So, and these kids before they come to college, they have none of that experience. So they've been taught that for 14 years. They go off to college thinking it's going to be transformative, and it will be to a certain extent. But given the necessity of the moment we're in, these kids actually need to go to college as young adults and not as adolescents. And being a young adult means you have a much deeper understanding of your personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
To be fully engaged, to be asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions, to be willing to risk failure, to rediscover and to create new ways and new strategies. To also be tolerant, to be able to, because that's what the liberal arts experience really is, listening to ideas that you may not necessarily agree with, but at the same time, you need to hear and you need to think about and not just reject out of hand. Going on a gap year is really the first time these kids will have been, firstly, independent, away from their parents who have guided their lives and, in many cases have disenable these kids to be able to feel confident and capable and willing to take on risk and to be their own independent person. So they can go to college and really get the most out of it, and then graduate from college with a lot more sense of the possibility, because there's going to be an enormous amount of opportunity out there.
Yeah. Well, let me also just play the devil's advocate for a second. Some people listening and parents who are not familiar with the gap year, this is all new to them. Some might say, well, if I let my child take that year off, what if they, lose the drive to go back to school for the education? Does that happen? What are the chances of them thinking, well, I don't need school anymore, I'm having a great year? You know what I'm saying? And get dismotivated. How do you keep them motivated during that gap year to continue that education?
Right. When I talk to parents, that's sort of like the first thing they say. And so, firstly, as far as the process, I want the kids I work with generally are going to college, and so I want them to go through the whole college application process and be accepted somewhere, and then they defer. And colleges are happy to defer kids because they know that the kids that come back are really capable and much better students. So in the entire 30 years I've been doing this, I've only had one student not go to college after their gap year. And that's because they come away from the gap year charged. They come away with a deeper, different sense of the excitement of understanding and learning about the world and all the opportunities that college has for engaging with other minds. And these kids, this being this age, being 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, it's a really intellectually fertile, cerebral moment in their lives when they're all thinking about how does this work, trying to figure out how does it work, and what can I do in this world, and being tracked. Sadly, kids are tracked into certain fields where they believe that all the money is going to be. So, finance is everybody's going into finance or business or that kind of thing. And the fact of the matter is, maybe your first job will be, will pay you a reasonable salary. But the upshot is, over the long term, you're going to have less capability because you're still stuck in that head. And what's true today isn't going to be true tomorrow or in a year or 5 years. So those jobs, you think about law, for instance, algorithms are able to do a lot of the clerking work. So all those associates that were all doing the grunt work for the partners are getting displaced, are not getting hired because the AI can do a much more effective job much more rapidly. Same way in medicine. You've got technology and robotics, displacing and monitoring and data collection, monitoring much more effectively than having individuals just sort of do it. So again, my point is, what those jobs that seem so sure that are going to be around for a lifetime aren't, and therefore you have to develop a much broader range of understanding of maybe what your interests are, but what's connected to it also. And so you learn. One of the most interesting MDs I ever ran across was a poet, and he was able to really be remarkable in terms of parsing the way people were feeling and understanding them, and his diagnosis were spectacular. He wasn't just, mechanically a good doctor. So, blending, the liberal arts with the sciences and the maths is brilliant. Yeah. And kids are beginning to figure that out. But colleges resist that because it's hard for them to break out of the department-based histories or sciences or anthropologies or, maths or whatever. So these kids are not being helped a lot. And I will say one more thing. And I don't even know if I'm answering the original question.
You are. We got it. No.
But I talk to a lot of Harvard kids. And I do because I'm part of the alumni.
Of course.
It's easy for me to get in there. And I'm talking to them, and I would just say, sort of off the cuff, about 40% of them are on anxiety medication. Maybe more, but at least 40%. But everybody I talk with is worried, very, very worried about the future, and very worried about their place in the future and how they're going to negotiate. And schools, these hot potato schools are just beginning to wrestle with the idea of how to create these sort of integrated, consilient departments where conversations can happen across, the spectrum. So these kids have a much better perspective on the world, their place in the world, and their own personal capacities and capabilities. But it's tough. It's slow. So the gap year, step back. The gap year is really designed to give them an opportunity to refresh themselves, to think about their place in the world, to reflect,
discover their own, unique skill, and maybe learn their purpose. That's amazing. Well, we appreciate you being here, Jake. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up the show at this time, but really excited to have you here. And you're helping so many, especially those Gen Zers. Guys, get started. Parents out there listening, adolescents, how do we reach out to you?
So, the Student Compass website, certainly, www.thestudentcompass.com. Also, my phone number is 860-921-6158. I'm actually really happy to talk to anybody. I mean, they're just
beautiful.
Because.
Yep. And excited to know, everyone out there, that you really are not alone. So many people are feeling uncertain, right, about what's next in their life, their future. It's a normal feeling. And Jake is our expert. Obviously, he's been through it, walked in the same shoes. He could help you with the gap year, college admissions as well, career planning, and so much more. Thank you again, Jake, for being here. Excited to have you, and looking forward to the next time we get to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. It's been fun.
You have a great day. And to all of our listeners and viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more. Thank you.
See you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes two. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzzed driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzzed driving, because buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.